Let me set the stage for you. You see a video that appears to be about how some guy doesn't like Deltarune Chapter 5. That's interesting. I wonder what his personal reasons for disliking this chapter were. Perhaps I can watch this video that he has uploaded in order to understand someone else's perspective and hear a thoughtful critique of this game I just played. You then click on the video, and the top comment, written and pinned by the creator, begins with, George Floyd was involved in a 2007 home invasion and aggravated robbery in Texas. This is the worst review I've ever covered on this channel. In fact, I wasn't sure if I was ever going to make another response video, but seeing this appear on YouTube was just a little too intriguing. What is this? What sort of person is putting their time into making a video like this? Well, this is TimeLireG, who's uploaded videos over games like Dark Souls and Deltarune since the time of Chapter 1, but now he has decided to become an edge merchant. Discontent with simply voicing his complaints about the chapter like a well-adjusted person, he has instead released this thing, so I'm going to respond to the video. One thing I do want to get out of the way quickly is that obviously you can criticize Deltarune and Chapter 5. Hell, I just did it in my last video. I'm not really someone who gets all that angry if you don't like the same things as me. What I dislike is bad argumentation, which this video has plenty of, but there are also more serious problems. So let's get into it. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more video essays and stuff over games like Deltarune. On with the video.
The problem isn't the lack of story progression, really. I've seen that complained about a whole lot online on VG, whatever other kind of boards on 4chan. I've seen some Twitter posts, some X posts, just complaining about the lack of story progression. But, you know, overall, I think that it's just one of those things. It's supposed to be a filler chapter, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. One of my bigger complaints, actually, is the characterization of just the main cast and everything.
Okay, cool. So his problem isn't with a lack of story progression, but rather with the characters. So let's hear his complaints.
I didn't have that many problems with some of the new characters or anything like that. It's mostly just how all the characters don't seem to be acting like themselves. And I'm not just talking about Ralsei just acting angry towards Flowery or anything, or jealous towards him, or the fact that, you know, Ralsei is angry that he's breaking the rules of the game or whatnot, all that meta stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just, you know, look at Ralsei going after the character Orange, and, you know, that is so out of character. He's just playfully messing with them more than usual. And that's another thing. All the characters act like Chapter 4 never happened, and you could say that's intentional. They're just trying to ignore, you know, what's going on in the background. They're just trying to have some fun, just as Toby said, where this is supposed to be like, you know, kind of like the last fun chapter, right? One last fun adventure together. So they're just trying to ignore that. You could say that. And, you know, you're probably right, but I feel like that would be pretty hard to ignore, you know?
Yeah, Ralsei treating Orange pretty cruelly is different from the character that we've seen in the previous chapters, but I think that this is pretty clearly on purpose from Toby. Ralsei's arc has partially been about him learning to stop holding everything back. He doesn't always have to be polite and put on a happy facade, but I kinda like how he sometimes comes off as genuinely unlikable now whenever dealing with Flowery and Orange. Not all growth and change is purely positive, and Ralsei certainly goes too far in a few places whenever it comes to expressing himself, and he apologizes later, realizing that he went too far. Not to mention the fact that Orange is a hypocritical jerk like 99% of the time anyways. Ralsei initially tried to treat her kindly, and he gave up after that didn't work out.
But outside of Ralsei acting strange, the more prominent one, I think, is Susie. Susie is completely acting, it's way different than she's ever had been acting. With Susie and Noelle, a lot of people are complaining about the romance in between those two and how forced it is. And I've always thought that that was intentional. You know, ever since that Ferris wheel scene, that is obviously the most forced thing ever. But the thing about that is Susie has always been kind of oblivious towards it. Oblivious towards all of Noelle's, you know, Noelle hitting on her, all of Noelle's compliments towards her. It's always been something that Susie was oblivious towards. And all of a sudden, I don't know if something was supposed to have happened off screen, but Susie understands that they're dating now all of a sudden out of nowhere. It is the strangest thing. Toby should have had more moments with them beforehand, a lot more moments to justify this. It's such an odd thing to see. And the fact that Susie just won't stop bringing up Noelle throughout the entire chapter, it is so out of character for her to do that. You know, I get that she's changed since chapter 1 and everything. a whole lot. Same with Rousey, but I don't know. It feels like it feels like there's a different director here other than Toby. It feels like this is someone else's writing, especially with that blue character, the blue flower character, by the way. I'm not talking about Aqua. I absolutely love Aqua. Everybody loves Aqua, and everybody loves Seth as well. But there's just something, about some of the new characters and just how the way Susie's acting.
While Susie may have initially been oblivious to Noelle's interest in her, there have been a ton of scenes at this point with the two getting closer. From all their interactions in Chapter 2, to the time at the Holiday's house in Chapter 4, and then the festival in Chapter 5, that is a very sizable chunk of the game's story that is dedicated towards building the dynamic and relationship between the two characters. Of course, it's subjective if you think the dynamic works, or the scenes are forced, but it really wasn't out of nowhere. And moving on to Susie's more recent characterization, and how she acts in Chapter 5, it's pretty clear in my opinion that she is pretty delusional. I've had my doubts since the end of Chapter 4, whenever she brushes off the end of the prophecy as something impossible that they would never let happen. And now she's living in the closet, and she seems to believe that dragging Noelle of all people into their adventures is the best way to solve the very serious situation they're in. I think the story is clearly setting up Susie to show the dark side of escapism and the dark worlds, so her behavior might be strange, but it's also very much in line with her character. Once again, it's not a positive change for her character, but it is one that clearly lines up with who she is.
A lot of characters are just acting not like themselves. You could say the same thing with Asgore as well, pushing Chris out of the shop like that. There might be some other things that we're not aware of as to why he would do that. Maybe he saw Chris open a dark fountain before, and maybe that's, maybe Chris was involved in what happened with Dessa's disappearance, and Asgore just, immediately wants to get him out of there.
Yeah, it's pretty much a dead and buried horse at this point, but it is pretty pathetic that people can't even engage with the story and characters as they are whenever they are supposedly trying to make a serious critique of the game. And the even crazier thing about this video in particular is that Timeline RG will later refer to Green with they/them pronouns. So what's different with Chris? Something about them just seems to give people brainworms, and I can't figure it out.
Asgore seems very, very different in the Dark World rather than the Light World, and I don't think that's supposed to be the case. It's not like the Dark World changes how people act or anything.
Even just from what we know about Asgore and Deltarune, Asgore's entire problem has been that he has pushed others away in search of answers for what happened on the day of the incident, and he's still quietly trying to do this. In Chapter 4, he's trying to prevent anybody from getting hurt, and throughout Chapter 5, he pushes away Flowery in order to focus on his research. So I think that it follows that he would kick Chris and Susie out of the Dark World. He wants to be the man of the house and protector of the town and everything, and he wants to kill the person who is creating the Dark Worlds. Similar to Undertale, it's an incredibly unhealthy way of dealing with the problem, and also a very violent and macho way, which reflects how Asgore has pretty much always approached problems.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was all the meta moments in this. Now, this has always been a thing with Undertale and Deltarune. As soon as you start the game around Chapter 1, when you go to Castletown, Rousey teaches you how to fight, and he just introduces, the soul and how it works, and game mechanics and everything like that. So this has always been a thing in the game. I just feel like it's being pushed way too hard now, and it kind of makes it hard to insert yourself in this universe and take everything seriously. What's the thing that we should be trying to save in the game here? Who are we trying to protect? Why should we care for these characters if they know that they're in a video game and everything like that? What's the thing in the game that we should be striving for here?
Frankly, I don't know what characters possessing some meta-knowledge has to do with goals and a person's investment in a story. Like, there's still interesting mysteries to be answered and character arcs in motion. And if there are a few guys in the background who know it's a game, then does that really ruin it? Undertale has characters who know about saves, resets, and more, and that doesn't ruin the emotional weight of that game in the least. And also, it's pretty much only Rousey and Darkners like Flowery who know about the inventory and stats and stuff. And it's also not even clear if they know that all of Deltarune is a game in like the literal sense either. Basically, we only have proof that the Dark Worlds themselves are games, which lines up with Rousey's belief that he isn't real, but the Lightners are. I get that not everyone wants meta stuff in their games, and whenever it's done poorly, I really hate it myself. But yeah, it's a Toby Fox game.
And I think that this reaches its climax at the end of Chapter 5. Again, there's going to be spoilers here. When Flowery just meets the knight for the first time, assumedly the first time, which, by the way, I don't know if this is a plot hole or not, but even if the knight didn't face much resistance, why didn't they just destroy all the flower pots? Why didn't Chris destroy all the flower pots before he created the Dark Fountain for the knight? If they are working together, which, obviously there's so much evidence towards that. Chris coughing during the knight fight. At least semi-working together anyway. Who knows what the extent of that is.
Why would Chris have to break the flower pots? That would just hurt Asgore, plus it would be loud and probably would have alerted Susie to what they were doing. While Flowery did end up posing as a larger threat to the knight than expected, I don't think Chris had any reason to expect that he would be any more difficult for the knight to beat than Tenno was. Overall, I don't think this was anywhere near a plot hole, and frankly I think it would have been really out of character for Chris to just destroy all of Asgore's stuff like that.
But this really reaches its climax when Flowery tries to get Asgore back and protect him from the knight. And just seeing him hit a whole bunch of 999s on the knight and everything, and the knight being forced into a battle crouching, kneeling before Flowery was probably the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. That took me out of the game. Honestly, it genuinely took me out of the game, out of the universe. And I'm like, well, what stakes are to be had in this game if this kind of stuff is going to be going on, if it's just all one survey program by Gaster?
The knight isn't forced to crouch, nor are they affected by Flowery's fake stats. Like, Flowery had a little fight with him, but he really didn't accomplish that much against the knight. Even though he seems to be one of the most powerful Darkners we've met, the knight completely ignores his attacks and kills him. This whole sequence mostly just served to endear us to Flowery and set up the knight as even more of a threat. So I'm really not sure how this deflates the stakes.
It's like, I just watched the knight just completely kneel to Flowery before slaying him, being forced into this little battle screen, and the knight just ignores. It just turns all the 999s into zeros. It felt so, I don't know. I don't think this is even Toby writing this at this point. I could be wrong, but did Toby actually write this chapter?
And then this sounds like almost the exact opposite complaint from before. I'm honestly not sure I understand what he's saying. My only interpretation is that it's too meta, or that damage numbers should be sacred, and the knight shouldn't be able to ignore them. And yeah, sorry man, but I doubt the game is going to end with the knight's health bar being depleted. Especially in a dark world where we literally know that everything is an illusion to some extent. I don't think it's crazy to make gameplay elements not actually represent what's going on there. Yeah, I don't know why he thinks it's not Toby Fox writing.
By the way, that bomb attack that Mew Mew has, that is I don't know if they play tested that too much, but you know, that's not a skill kind of a thing, because you can only focus on so many things at the same time. I know it's in a small battle screen, but I'm not saying to nerf it, you know, I'm not saying to nerf it, but that's pretty brutal.
I agree that the bomb attack is pretty annoying. I think they can make it more manageable if the bombs maybe shed the lines which they explode down whenever they are first placed, and then faded away, as that would keep a bit of the memory element, but make it a bit less overwhelming. Or maybe just slowing it down a tiny amount would make it better. It is a frustrating attack.
You know, Mad Mew Mew being supposedly the final Shadow Crystal boss, I have some complaints about that as well. I get that it's a Lightner, right? Because it's just Mettaton possessing the Mad Mew Mew doll and everything. We got some more lore information there, which, you know, that's probably foreshadowing something later on. So I can't blame it too much. I can't blame the developers too much for adding a Mad Mew Mew Shadow Crystal fight, but it probably should have been someone more significant, in all honesty. And I don't know if Toby had full creative control when implementing Mad Mew Mew as a fight, adding, you know, Mettaton and Mad Mew Mew as a fight in there, but...
And once again, I have no idea why he seems to think that Toby Fox has suddenly lost control over the game which he directs, finances, and publishes. I agree that Mad Mew Mew isn't the most memorable secret fight, and now after the quick update it does have a bit more purpose, but I'm not going to include that in this video because, you know, it was now when you made this. But at the same time, I don't think the fight had to be so insignificant. I mean, Jevil literally only appears during a secret boss fight, and the other ghost that dreams of having a body, Mettaton, has already been tied to the Shadow Crystal stuff before, with Spam Tom Neo literally being a robot that represented their dream of physical body. So I do think it is really important that this is a Lightner Darkner combo for the Shadow Crystal boss. Very unique from the other ones.
That's something else I want to talk about. Toby has been talking about this vision he had ever since around, 2011, 2012. And he's been talking about how this is his own personal project that, you know, he wants full creative control over, I think is what he said. I could be wrong, but to say this and to say that this is your own personal thing that, you know, nobody else should be, you know, adding any kind of story elements to it, and then in chapter 1, he goes and purchases the rights to use, or just asks for the rights to use characters like Jevil or the King or Lancer. It's like, well, are they important to the story then? Because they're not your characters.
If you're not aware, those listed character designs were made by Canotines way back in 2012, and Toby has stated their art was the inspiration for this game in the first place. So I'm not sure how this inclusion disrupted Toby's unified vision for the game, especially given that said art literally inspired the vision.
And then, having all these other developers adding their own stuff to it just feels wrong. It's having stuff like an Among Us reference in the game, having all this stuff in the game that's going to date it. Like, is this truly your passion project that you wouldn't let anybody else touch? Is this precious thing to you that only you should be working on it, and then you just go and have all these developers including their own ideas into it? I don't know how I feel about that.
And yeah, this is really stupid. An artist does not have to be a lone auteur to have a consistent vision. Even then, things can change over time. I severely doubt that Toby came up with Deltarune fully formed 1 million years ago. It's clearly more so that he's had a vision for the characters, world, themes, and especially the ending in mind. And furthermore, should he not iterate on the idea? Should he not listen to feedback or ideas from other artists? And if he has a better idea, or is inspired by something new, should he throw it away in order to preserve some original pure idea? I feel like that's obviously stupid. And the Among Us joke is in the game because Toby thought it was funny. You can say that about like 50% of the stuff in the game. I'm not sure why this goofy reference is any different. I think that this whole Toby didn't do it is just TimeLiar trying to avoid criticizing Toby, as he has built him up as someone who only makes good games. So anything that he thinks is seriously bad at Deltarune must come from the corruption of external artists or other Deltarune team members, rather than Toby making a decision that he disagreed with. Obviously, it's just conjecture. I mean, honestly, this is the only way that I can really interpret all this talk about Toby not having control over the story anymore.
Just before the Mad Mew Mew fight, Ralsei says something like, oh, this is probably going to be a secret boss that has a really memorable track and awesome, awesome battle scene or something. It's like, I don't know if this is a joke making fun of the predictability of Deltarune, but that probably doesn't look too good either way. The second thing it could be, which doesn't look too good, is just stroking his own ego, basically, whether it's Toby or whoever added this. I personally don't think Toby would. Oh well, then again, in the off remastering, he added himself in place of the Dopefish. So that's and the Papyrus theme situation with Dead End. I don't know. It feels really out of place. And then you also have the ego stroking thing of Temmie sitting at her table during the festival, where you have the option to make Chris tell her that she's a genius, and then Susie's like, yeah, she's so good, isn't she, Chris? I'm not one to throw around the new term cringe that's been pretty popular, the past 7 years or so, but honestly, I kind of cringed up when I saw that. It's something that, I don't even agree with the word cringe. I think everybody should be special in their own weird kind of way, but to actually go and have some kind of an ego thing like that, it's so far, it doesn't belong in the game, honestly, in my opinion.
So I don't know about the off stuff. Personally, I do heavily prefer the original soundtrack to Toby's, but on the other hand, he was hired to make the soundtrack. I don't think perfectly trying to recreate the original made any sense, and I don't think there was anything wrong with him including some of his own leitmotifs in it. He's done this with other games he's featured in, like Amori, and even back to the Homestuck days. I don't know, it doesn't really strike me as an ego thing, it's just kinda what he does. As for the Tim stuff, I feel like the drawing looking like Tim is just an ongoing joke, with Tim and Deltarune doing things related to the real Timmy Chang, like Timmy voicing her singing Don't Forget, or Tim drawing a picture of Timmy's avatar. As for Susie complimenting Tim, what Susie specifically says is, hey, her art's crazy good. Even she's good at stuff. This dialogue seems to carry implications with it that Susie is comparing herself to others' abilities, similar to her healing magic in Chapter 4. And an ongoing plot thread with Susie is her being annoyed by her own abilities and limitations. The next few complaints aren't anything crazy, he just talks about expectations for the festival in the chapter. So I'm gonna skip ahead to a bit more interesting stuff. To be fair, I understand that some people had higher expectations for the festival than it delivered, but it's not really something I can respond to in a very interesting way, as it's not a very concrete complaint of the game as it exists to begin with. It's more so just a mismatch of expectations and what the game actually ended up providing.
It's very strange when you're on a thread and you're just trying to read other people coming up with their own theories, as you always do. one of the reasons why I really, really loved Undertale at first. At first, I didn't like Undertale, but then I started theorizing with other people. It's kind of the same with my blog on video game mysteries, myths, urban legends, secrets, rumors, and oddities and stuff like that. I love talking about unknown things in video games, unexplained things in video games. That's one of my favorite things to do. So, Undertale was up my alley. Deltarune is up my alley. But you have these kind of tourists, and I'm not insulting anyone, by the way. If someone likes the game just for the gameplay, and they don't care about the story lore or anything, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there comes a time when someone doesn't even engage with the game at all. And this is the same for cartoons, anime, movies, anything else. When you have individuals going to certain threads, certain forums online and pretending like they actually played it and engaged with the medium, there's issues there. There's a lot of conflict because you have this one group of people that don't even play the game. Just think about Earthbound, Persona 5, Toho. You have people just being there, pretending like they know what's going on in the story, making so many mistakes. I just feel like a lot of people that defend Chapter 5 are just people that either haven't played it or just people that really just prefer the gameplay. Everybody's complaints about the characters, the story progression. These people kind of just pass it off because quote-unquote gameplay good. And I don't think, if you're going to be rating a game on how good it is, you should include everything. The story, the gameplay, its development, just everything about it.
Well, I do agree that Deltarune, like just about any popular story-based game, has a big group of people who have basically learned about it through fandom osmosis rather than actually playing the game themselves. And yeah, it's not pleasant trying to talk with them. I do think the inverse has also become true to some extent. There's a lot of stuff in Deltarune. A lot of characters, lore, secrets, and the fandom can be really toxic if you get any details wrong. It's honestly kind of strange to me, as the Deltarune fandom isn't like the first thing I made videos for. And I made mistakes in my other videos as well, but I've never got the viscerally angry responses for making mistakes in those videos like I have for Deltarune. I think it's also just a more recent thing with the popularity of terms like LARPer and the spread of Twitter-style gotcha responses spreading to short-form content platforms like TikTok and now everywhere on YouTube. The internet really seems to become an even more hostile place as a whole. So I do kind of want to just push back against that a bit. A lot of purity testing in fandoms, and it's all kind of dumb. Obviously correct mistakes, and I encourage you to actually, play the game, but I feel like it's also just not that serious. Just enjoy the game and talk about it and criticize it or whatever. At the same time, I don't understand this complaint of LARPers in the context of the video, as I really think the majority of people who like Chapter 5 actually played it. Sure, not everybody who played it liked it, but I don't think the people who don't actually play the game are the ones who most heavily appreciate a low-stakes chapter with less lore than previous ones.
By the way, what was with the Chapter 5 egg room? It kind of seems like Toby lost the plot and he's too interested with putting memes and jokes in his video game rather than trying to create a serious story here anymore. The Chapter 1 and 2 egg room, they were just kind of these random locations that don't really have too much lore to them. It just explains that there's this Eggman going around, giving Chris these eggs. And there was something with the trial between all the flower characters where it says the egg can be used as evidence, you'll know when. Something suspicious like that. But in Chapter 1 and 2, you just had the simple egg rooms. And in Chapter 3, you've had one of the most interesting egg rooms, if not for Chapter 4, where you just have this unique area where Chris is having this full-on conversation with the Eggman. And then in Chapter 4, you have probably the most serious scene in the entire game. So Chris sits down in this Chapter 4 egg room that seems to be a hospital or a therapist room, where he's asking Chris to draw what he saw. And, Chris can't do it. This is where he picked up the trait of always washing his hands because whatever he saw, whatever Chris has done has traumatized him. And it's this very serious thing. And then Chapter 5 comes along with Chapter 5's egg room, and Toby Fox just inserts himself as the annoying dog flying around in a balloon. And before you enter the room, before you enter the Chapter 5 egg room, are you serious? Did Toby just forget that he's writing a serious story, or, what's going on here? It's so out of place. It's so out of touch with whatever he's trying to do. It's it's embarrassing. I feel embarrassed, secondhand embarrassment for Toby Fox, honestly.
So you literally follow the annoying dog signs to get to the Chapter 2 egg room. In fact, the annoying dog has consistently been involved with secrets all the way back to Undertale. I also don't think the method for finding the egg rooms has to be serious for the stories within the egg rooms to be serious. I think Time G is just reading ego into any sort of usage of the annoying dog or Timmy characters when I don't think that that's the intention at all. They are silly self-inserts that are mostly used for comedic effect, not a wish fulfillment self-insert or whatever.
Speaking of the new characters, by the way, like I said, I didn't have a problem with Yellow. I laughed quite a bit actually during his, his antics and everything. Aqua and Seth, probably the best new characters that were introduced. But the rest of the cast, though, I don't really have anything to say about Green. I like Green as a character. I mean, they don't really do anything. It's kind of like a joke kind of character. So. Nothing much I can really say about them. But that blue character having their own face portrait, and it just looks like a Steven Universe character, and I'm glad I never watched that show. If you like that show, then good on you, but that's not my kind of a show, but it just gives me a whole lot of Tumblr-esque, there's that word the younger generations use, the Tumblr quote-unquote vibe. When I see that character, there's something really off about that character. There's just something about that character, that blue flower character, and again, I'm not talking about Aqua. I am not talking about Aqua. I am talking about the tutu wearing, Steven Universe looking Tumblr. There's too much Tumblr there. All right, there is way too much Tumblr there, and I don't know. I don't even know how I feel about the flowers being human. Like, I get they're based on the human souls and everything. All right, but at the end of the day, I think Toby could have made them more plant-like, to be honest.
To Tumblr. That's the complaint. Admittedly, I'm not totally sure what he means by that. When I hear that something is Tumblr, I feel like it usually means one of two things. Either it means that something is vaguely queer, and the person making that complaint doesn't like it, or it means that the thing is like that Thomas Jefferson drawing. You know the one. Something that is relatively harmless, but filled with so many labels and progressive words and stuff that it almost comes off as childish or even a little insulting. And yeah, usually people respond to it by saying it's cringe, which it often is. But Blue is just a feminine, flamboyant guy, and he is not the only feminine guy in Deltarune or Undertale. Not even close, there's like 10 other ones. So no, I don't think it's a very valid criticism of his character. Nor do I think that Blue was the most compelling character for me personally, but like, the responses that people had to him, and especially things like the thumbnail of this video, really do expose a lot of the bias against him is pretty obvious racism, I can't lie.
I didn't like Orange that much. Why are they a rat? Like, why is Orange a rat? I get Seth looks like a human. Aqua looks like a human, right? I think that Blue character looks way too much like a human. I think that's why there's something off about it. I thought humans in Undertale and Deltarune, they were supposed to kind of look like blobs, like Frisk and Chris and everything, and Kara. But I think that's what's putting me off from the character, and it's only human in the portrait for some reason. Like, that character looks human in the portrait, but it doesn't on the actual field. I don't understand that. There's something so off about that.
So while it's never explicitly said, I think that the flowers are trying to appear human because that's what they think Asgore wants out of them. But none of them are quite sure what a human is. Aqua has either 1 or 3 eyes, Seth is indecisive about their gender, Green never speaks, Yellow has a crazy fixation on justice, and Orange is a mouse. Furthermore, we've also never seen a human talk sprite in Undertale or Deltarune, so there's nothing to really compare the flower talk sprites against. And I think if we compare their world sprites against the humans' world sprites, then I really don't think they look too human or not blobby enough. So, let's talk about the elephant in the room. What exactly is going on with Time Liar? That video wasn't perfect by any means, but it was just like kind of meandering and had a few weird moments. But what the hell is that thumbnail and top comment? This video was mostly just normal complaints, but nothing like this comment or thumbnail. I think it was pretty much a defense mechanism, as originally the video apparently had a different thumbnail. But as Time Liar G's genuine critique of the chapter wasn't being received like he was hoping, he turned to edginess and just being a weird asshole. Like, I don't really get it. Obviously this video was gonna be received controversially at the very least. Turning to this really just reveals more about Time Liar himself than it does with all the people who are now angry at him. And high-key, the more I look through this channel, the worse it gets. Obviously, let's look at this top comment. So he's basically claiming that George Floyd was a bad guy, and that's why it's okay to make fun of his murder and compare the only black hooded character in Deltarune to him. Why? It's just clear racism. And this top comment was trying to backpedal to some tired "he was no angel" talking point, and it's absolutely pointless, because everybody really knows that the reason that Timeliner G specifically included George Floyd in his thumbnail is because he wants to make fun of a black man who was murdered by the police in a thumbnail for a video about Deltarune. It's really that simple. He then claims that he's not right-wing, and then he immediately goes on to call people calling him transphobic for misgendering Chris leftoids, and complains about pride and diversity. I don't know, he's honestly just a really odd character. A gay Christian furry who really hates pride and leftoids, has a thing against slang, and seems to think that George Floyd jokes are just the funniest thing ever. Finally, and honestly, this is probably the funniest part of the video and comments, he keeps complaining about slang. Like in the video, he kinda jokingly uses the words vibe and cringe, and he doesn't like how younger people use it, even though those words have been popular for like a decade at this point. But he also says that Loki, Cap, and For Real are hood speak. Yeah, I wonder what he harbors against people who speak in a way that he considers hood. Timeliner G is one of those really annoying sorts of people. Like, come on, at this point, just be open with your racism. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, look at these thumbnails. He's not doing a very good job of hiding it, and he just keeps going. Even to within a few hours before I wrote the script, he's still arguing with people in the comments. And to finish this up, he also draws cub art, which I can assume is some creep stuff that I've really not learned more about. And since releasing this first video, he has made several more bait videos since, now trying to get some more views. But the gimmick has clearly worn off, and they aren't doing very well. Unfortunately, these videos also have a fundraiser for regrowing circumcised foreskin, and it has exactly $10 raised, which I have to admit is a very funny bit. At no point should I be giving it to him, but I'll have to give that one to him. My release of this video will unfortunately put some more attention on his channel, so please don't go there just to comment mean stuff. It accomplishes nothing, and really only feeds it. So, that was interesting. I'm betting that a lot of you are interested in the fact that Finnegan Fox, the YouTuber who I covered in my original Deltarune response video, has released a new video over chapters 3 and 4. And yeah, he sure has. Personally, I haven't watched that much of it. I've seen bits of it, and so I still have a lot of the same problems with the general annoying edginess throughout the video, and it really does seem like a huge amount of its over 2-hour runtime is dedicated to what can really only be described as nitpicks, which is a strange choice, because there are a few decent arguments in there. He does a better job of arguing his points. He clearly put a lot more thought and effort into it, but like, I don't know. I still don't agree with most of the points, but it's mostly subjective stuff that doesn't really make too much sense to respond to, because I'll basically be saying, no, I disagree. And I'll just say that for like 2 hours straight. It won't make a very good video. So that's all to say, I'm really not too interested in covering it, to be honest. Okay, that's all for this video. Bit of an odd one. But thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe and check out my other Chapter 5 video, where I went over my own terrible predictions for the chapter, and some of my own criticisms. Maybe I'll have to respond to myself soon. And I have a big video essay in the works for Chapter 5. And I'm getting right back to work on it now that this little excursion is done. So yeah, that's it.